There are 412 lanterns in the village of Hollow Creek, and for 61 years, one man lit every single one of them by hand. His name was Eli Marsh, and by the time this story begins, most of the village had forgotten his last name entirely. To them, he was simply the lantern keeper, an old man with a bent back and a wooden ladder, walking the same 6 streets every evening at dusk, touching a long brass wick lighter to glass after glass after glass, until the whole village glowed gold against the coming dark. Children used to follow him when they were small. They didn't anymore. Now they had screens that lit up brighter than any lantern ever could, and porches with electric bulbs their parents had installed years ago. And the truth was, in a village edging closer to the 21st century, nobody quite understood why the town council still paid an 80-year-old man to walk around lighting fire by hand. Nobody, except the people old enough to remember the night the lanterns saved them. That's not a metaphor. That's not a nice turn of phrase for a YouTube script. That is, according to everyone over the age of 70 in Hollow Creek, a simple fact. 31 years before this story begins, a flood came through the valley in the middle of the night, the kind of flood that doesn't announce itself with thunder or warning sirens, just a sound like the whole world exhaling at once. The creek that gave the village its name rose 9 feet in under 2 hours. Half the town lost power before midnight, and in the pitch dark, with rain coming sideways and water climbing porch steps, people didn't know which way was uphill anymore. Eli Marsh was 30 years old that night, new to the job his own father had held before him, and when the power died, he didn't go home to protect his own house. He grabbed his ladder, his wick lighter, and every match he owned, and he walked out into that storm to light every lantern he could reach. Not because anyone told him to, because it was the only thing he knew how to do that might help. One by one, through rain that should have snuffed out any flame ever lit, the lanterns of Hollow Creek came alive, small orange dots climbing up the hillside streets, marking the path to higher ground for families wading through black water with children on their shoulders. 11 people later said in 11 separate interviews for the county paper that they followed those lights out of the flood without knowing exactly where they led, only that the light was warmer than the dark, and warmer felt like somewhere safe. Nobody died in Hollow Creek that night. 3 villages downstream lost people. Hollow Creek did not. And Eli Marsh, when people tried to call him a hero afterward, just shrugged in that quiet way of his and said, "I only lit what was already there. The lanterns did the rest." That was 31 years ago. The story had calcified into local legend, told at town meetings and 4th of July barbecues, the way stories do when the people who lived them start disappearing from the room one by one. And somewhere in the retelling, it had stopped being a memory and started being decoration, a nice thing to say about the old man with the ladder right before the town council voted almost unanimously to finally replace the lantern system with modern LED streetlights. It would save the town $11,000 a year. Eli's position would be respectfully retired, with a plaque and a small pension and a photograph in the newsletter. The vote happened on a Tuesday in March. Eli Marsh wasn't in the room. Nobody thought to invite him. The person who told him was a 9-year-old girl named Junie Castellanos, and she told him not because she understood the whole situation, but because she loved him in the specific and total way that children love the adults who make them feel noticed. Junie's mother ran the diner on Elm Street, and Junie had grown up watching Eli come in every evening at 5:30 sharp for a cup of black coffee before his rounds, the same order for as long as she could remember. He always said, "Evening, Junie," like her name was the nicest word he knew. He always let her carry his wick lighter the 2 blocks to the first lantern, even though she was, by her own admission, not that careful with things. She heard about the vote from her mother, who heard about it from a customer, who'd heard about it from someone on the council. And that evening, when Eli came in for his coffee, Junie set the cup down in front of him and said, without any warning at all, "They're gonna turn off your job." Eli went very still. "The lights," she clarified in the blunt, accidental way that 9-year-olds deliver devastating news. "The new bright ones. My mom said the council voted. She said it's not because you did anything wrong. She said it's just progress." Eli sat with his coffee cooling in front of him for a long moment. Then he did something Junie had never seen him do in 4 years of watching him walk past the diner window every night. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes, and he said, "Well, I suppose 412 is a good number to stop on." He left his coffee unfinished. He did his rounds that night anyway, every single lantern, though nobody had asked him to, and nobody was required to pay him for one more evening. Junie watched him from the diner window, an old man moving slower than she'd ever seen him move, touching flame to glass down every street of the only town he'd ever called home, like he was saying goodbye to 412 old friends, one by one.
Here is the thing about Junie Castellanos that the rest of the story depends on. She was young enough to still believe that unfair things could simply be undone if the right person heard about them at the right time. She didn't go to her mother. She didn't go to the council, not directly, because 9-year-olds don't get invited to council meetings, and she knew it. Instead, she did the only thing she could think to do, which was to ask everyone she knew a single question. "Do you remember the flood?" She asked her teacher. She asked the man who ran the hardware store. She asked her grandmother, who started crying halfway through answering and had to sit down. She asked, over the course of 11 days, 43 separate adults in Hollow Creek, and she wrote down what every single one of them told her in a school notebook with a unicorn on the cover, because nobody had told her to stop, and stubbornness in a 9-year-old looks a great deal like determination once you squint. What she collected wasn't just one story about one flood. It was 43 different memories of the same warm, small light. A woman who'd followed the lanterns carrying her newborn son, who was now 19 and worked at the feed store. A man who'd broken his ankle in the dark and crawled toward the nearest lantern glow because it was the only landmark he could find. A retired school teacher who said simply, "That light was the last thing I saw before I stopped being afraid." Junie brought her unicorn notebook to the next town council meeting. She wasn't on the agenda. She stood up anyway during the public comment period, a 9-year-old in a rain jacket 2 sizes too big, and she read all 43 stories out loud, one after another in a voice that started out shaky and ended up steady, because somewhere around story number 12, the room had gone completely silent, and silence, it turns out, is its own kind of encouragement. She finished with her own line, the only one that wasn't borrowed from someone else. "You're not just turning off some lights, you're turning off the reason we all made it home that night. And I don't think that's the same thing as progress. I think that's just forgetting." Nobody in that meeting room had an immediate answer for a 9-year-old holding a unicorn notebook. The council chairwoman, a practical woman named Denise O'Coffer, who had voted in favor of the LED replacement herself, sat quietly for a long moment before she finally spoke. "How many lanterns are there," she asked, "that we'd actually need to keep that light on every path someone might take out of a flood?" Nobody knew the number, but Eli Marsh, who had come to the meeting that night without telling anyone he was going, quietly did. 68, he said, standing at the back of the room. "The ones on the roads leading up from the creek. 68 lanterns cover every evacuation path in this town." It wasn't the full 412, it wasn't the whole job he'd held for 61 years, but it was something, and something when you'd expected nothing can feel like everything. The council didn't reverse the whole vote that night. They compromised, the way most real change actually happens, not with a single dramatic reversal, but with people meeting each other part way.
344 lanterns became modern LED streetlights, efficient and bright and easy to maintain. But 68 lanterns, the ones marking every road out of the valley, stayed exactly as they were, gaslit, handlit, kept alive by an old man with a ladder every evening at dusk, as long as he was able to climb it. And when Eli Marsh could no longer manage the ladder, which happened 4 years later, quietly, the way most endings happen, the job didn't disappear. Junie Castellanos, 13 years old by then, asked to learn it. She spent that whole summer walking beside him, carrying the wick lighter herself this time, memorizing which lanterns stuck, which ones needed a careful hand in the wind, which street corner had the one that Eli always lit last because it had been his father's favorite. Eli Marsh passed away 3 winters later, in his sleep, at 84 years old. The whole village came to the funeral, more people than the church had ever held for a single service, and the council voted, unanimously this time, without a single dissenting voice, to rename the 68 remaining lanterns the Marsh Lights, with a small brass plaque at the base of the first one that simply read, "He only lit what was already there." Junie kept the job. She's 26 now. She still stops by the diner her mother used to run, still walks the same evening rounds at dusk, and every single evening, without fail, she lights that first lantern, Eli's father's favorite, a little slower than the rest, just to give herself one quiet minute with a man who taught her that the smallest, oldest jobs are sometimes the ones holding an entire town together. The village of Hollow Creek didn't stop progress that night in the council meeting. The streetlights still came. The town still moved forward, the way every town eventually does. But somewhere in the middle of all that moving forward, 68 small flames kept burning, not because they were the most efficient choice, but because a 9-year-old girl understood something that a lot of adults had forgotten, that some lights aren't just for seeing by. Some lights are for finding your way home. If there's a small, quiet, unglamorous light still burning somewhere in your own life, a tradition, a person, a habit of kindness nobody applauds for, this is your reminder that it might be doing more work than anyone around you realizes. Don't let it go out just because it stopped looking necessary. Someone, someday, in a storm you can't yet see coming, might need exactly that light to find their way home.